It's only one, Moz.
Talk about Ms. Shabazz in your time in law, particular in New York, the amount of molestation cases, pedophilia cases that you've seen, to the best of your knowledge, come through, and just talk about the culture of pedophilia and molestation. And that'll obviously transition into our next topic, R. Kelly.
Right.
But just talk about that, and how many cases of molestation and pedophilia have you found coming through in New York?
I've handled quite a few personally. I don't know that there is an uptick, I would say, in recent years in sexual molestation cases. I would say maybe there is more of an uptick in reporting the cases, because there's a difference between things happening more often and things being reported more often, right? That were happening all the time, right? These things may have always been reported, but now with the advent of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up and the Mute R. Kelly, and people are finding their voice, and so more women are reporting incidences of sexual molestation as opposed to keeping it a secret, which most women were taught growing up. If that happens to you, keep it a secret, and you walk with the shame and you carry that with you. So I wouldn't say that there was an uptick, but those are very difficult cases, because you will always have a defendant on the other side of that case, usually a male, saying, I didn't do that. I didn't do those things. I would never do those things. That's not me. That's not who I am. And so, but then you have a victim who's saying, he touched me inappropriately, or he walked into my bedroom when it was dark and, touched me under my clothing, or something to that effect. And so those are difficult cases, and they often they go to trial. They go to trial because the consequences are so great for a man, that if he's convicted, not only are you going to be in prison, but you likely will be a registered sex offender for the rest of your life. All right, and so the stakes are very high. And if there is, and there seldom is evidence, right? There's seldom there is evidence. Usually these cases are pattern of conduct cases, where a course of conduct, where something is happening over a course of time, and by the time the young woman or young man is comfortable enough or brave enough to speak about it, there's no physical evidence to support their claim, right? And so then it becomes, it's a sort of attack against the victim as to, well, why didn't you say it sooner? Why didn't you report it sooner? As if that was an option for them, right? Because obviously if it was, they probably would have availed themselves of that avenue. And so it's a lot of people are speaking about this issue who aren't educated about a lot of things, like child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, which is a real thing, that is used in the courts to explain why children or young people delay in telling about sexual molestation. And they bring social workers in to testify about why a child would not disclose for years some type of activity or untoward happening to them. And as long as the jury can accept that and understand it, then they can find someone guilty with very little evidence and just based on the words of that victim.
What do you think about the R. Kelly case? And first I'll ask you about, I think down in Fulton County, Georgia, they're talking about contacting the witnesses to try to bring up charges. As an attorney, practicing on both sides of the law, what would you say the percentages of him actually being convicted after all this time are brought in to, to face these charges? What do you think about that?
I think the percentage would be great if it was the feds bringing the case. And I think the feds have an opportunity here to bring a case under the Mann Act, 18 USC 2422. I believe that's the statute. That prints it. Yeah, 18 USC 2422. Actually, let me read it. It says, whoever knowingly persuades, induces, entices, or coerces an individual to travel in interstate or foreign commerce on any territory or possession of the United States to engage in prostitution or in any sexual activity for which any person can be charged with a criminal offense or attempts to do so shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years. The second section of that says whoever does this with an individual who has not attained the age of 18 years, right, can be fined and or imprisoned for not less than 10 years or for life, right? And so the statute can probably go back at least 5 years. So they can go at least to 2013. And I'm sure that they can find at least that one girl who was having sex with the young girl. And she doesn't seem to be like, she's not willing to be a cooperative witness. I think that they could build a case against him if they wanted to. The problem is that unfortunately Black women, and I say this all the time, we are the least protected species on this planet. And oftentimes our pain goes unrecognized and unacknowledged, and like Chance said, unreal to many people, right? Because we have been so sexualized in this society that it is hard for many men to fathom that we could be violated in that way. We can be violated sexually because we are so over-sexualized that if some man says that he had sex with us, we must have consented. Of course we consented, right? And so that yeah, I'm about to get upset.
You know what? If you don't mind, Mr. Bass, you kind of led me to my next question, and that is just to get away from the attorney table real quick and the professionalism real quick. Just give us a perspective of a Black woman in this whole situation, because it's a lot going on. Yeah. And we come on this platform often and we try and pride ourselves in being as objective as possible. That being said, we're looking at it from a perspective of two Black men. Right. And we're really looking forward to having you on the show just to be able to have this kind of dialogue. But in particular, given everything that's going on, get your perspective as a Black woman just about what it seems like there's a divide right now between Black men and Black women, in particular this situation. And it's something that's stemming and has been going on throughout history, throughout our time. Yeah. Speak on it from your perspective, if you don't mind.
It's difficult because, you know, obviously we have to deal with the history of molestation in our own community, in the Black community, right? And the reality, the realities that lie within that. But that can never serve as an excuse, right? As an excuse to justify the behavior that R. Kelly has engaged in over the past, I don't know, 20 years or whatever. I was done with R. Kelly after I saw the video. I saw the video, admittedly so. And it was readily obvious to me that that was a child in the video. And I didn't need any more than that. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand that it does not matter. It does not matter to the law, and it does not matter to decent people that a young girl consented to sex, right? Because at that age, at any age of minority, under 16 and under, you are not capable. You are not capable of consenting. And the law provides for that, because statutory rape is a strict liability crime. That's one of the only strict liability crimes there is. And by strict liability, I mean it doesn't require any mens rea. You don't have to have any intent to have slept with a minor. It doesn't matter that you thought she was 18. It doesn't matter you thought she was 19 when in actuality she was 13 or 14 or 15. Mistake in fact is not a defense at all, right? And so even the law is outraged by men who say, well, these young girls, or I heard the excuse back in the days, our people were getting married at 13 and 14 years old. Yeah, back in the days, our people were slaves too, right? So what's the point? What is your point, right? We progress as a people naturally. And so it doesn't make sense to me that anyone would hearken back to what we used to be to justify what we are. That just can't be. That can't be. It can't be. And I want to see him in jail. I'm sorry. I want to see him in jail. I want to see him in jail. And I have no patience and or tolerance for anyone, male or female, who finds any justification in this behavior. It's just, there's just none there. None.
Right.
Talk about how difficult it is as an attorney having to take on clients that you know may be guilty, or you know their entire situation. In particular, maybe something like this, and you're very passionate about it, but you have to separate your personal from your professional. Talk about, just get into that zone and get into how that is.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I try to explain to people is that I'm very clear on what my job is as a criminal defense attorney, right? I am not out to prove the truth of what occurred. That's not my job. That's not my job. My job, very simply, is to put the people to their burden. And let me say that again. The burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. My job is to ensure that every person has a zealous defense. Every person that I represent has a zealous defense. And if the people prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, they did so because they had competent evidence to do so with. That's my job. That's it. And so whether or not the person did it is never a factor for me, because I can never know that. Right? There are there's a quote, I forget who says it, but there are our things that we know, our known knowns, and there are some known unknowns, and then there are unknown unknowns, right? There's no way for me to know whether a person actually committed the crime unless they confess. And I promise you, people just don't. They don't say, I did it, but I need you to get me off. They don't do that. They typically maintain their innocence. Until, to the end of it, where you see the Richard Gere movie where the guy, he gets off, turns back and goes, says some slick shit like, yeah, thank you. Right? And then you're like, but there's really no room for me to engage in that sort of thinking, because it will affect my ability to defend my client with the zealousness that he is entitled to under the Constitution. And so I don't concern myself with that. I'm concerned with what the evidence proves. If the evidence proves that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then the jury will find you guilty. And the evidence does not prove that, then you will be found not guilty. And let's be clear, a finding of not guilty is not a finding of innocence. That's not the same thing, right? And so when we think about trials like O.J. Simpson, and most Black people swear for God he did that shit, right? We think he did it, right? And but we know he was found not guilty. And so that is the prime example of someone who we believe was found not guilty because the evidence was deficient, but we don't think he was innocent.